Hi, government. Are you complete?
Yes, Gov complete.
Okay. Opposition complete?
Yes, we are complete.
Okay. Before debate, please write down your speaker order in the chat box. And also, before you start your speech, please state your POI mechanism. Okay, I think we shall begin. I don't have to read the regulation. I think you already know. So without further ado, I call upon Prime Minister. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Wait a minute. Looking for stopwatch. Timer. um, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Member of the House, as the governments of the House, we believe that emission trading is not a solution, right? Firstly, let's characterize what is emissions trading, right? How does it work, right? Emission trading, it works where the government are trying to reduce the emissions gas by limiting how much emissions gas that each company could produce, right? For example, mostly government would like to reduce the 5% of emissions gas from each companies, right? For example, if each companies produce 10,000 gas emissions gas per year, that it means that each company that it means those companies have to reduce their emissions gas from 10,000 to 9,500 ton gas emissions per year, right? So therefore, if these companies, so therefore each companies have limitations how much that they could produce, right? uh, so if these companies would like to produce more, for example, beyond their limitations, that they have to buy other the rights of others, the rights of emissions gas from other companies or from other institutions, right? um, therefore we say that at the end, this emission trading, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work out in order to reduce or minimize the emissions gas, right? Or it will be inefficient to do so, right? Because firstly, let's characterize how companies are, right? How do they work, right? We said that companies are inherently profit oriented, right? Companies are mostly, before this trading happened, for example, or before other agreement like Paris Agreement or Kyoto Protocol existed, we knew that companies are the main cause of global warming, right? All they care about is only their profit, right? They never have the initiative, right? They never have the initiative that uh, how much harms that they have created towards the environment, right? How much contributions that they have towards the environmental issues itself, right? So we say that the companies are really profit oriented, and they never care about the environmental issues, right? Now let's talk about what happened with the emission trading, right? With the emission trading, it is not going to make the company regulating their system into being more eco-friendly, right? Instead, these companies do not want to being this advantage, they do not want to lose anything through this through this another policies, right? Therefore, these companies creating better system in order to not lose anything. For example, like what I said before, like what I said earlier, that where these big companies, for example, where they are producing very high gas emissions, like fossil fuel companies, or in developing countries where they are like, how to say, where it is related to natural resources or raw materials, where it needs where it will produce a lot of where it will produce a lot of gas emissions. Therefore, these companies do not want to think like, hey, let's just reduce our productions, and let's take care more about the environment. No, that's not what they're going to do. They're going to buy another emissions right from another companies, that are saving their rights in order to get profit, in order to like, how to say, in order to get money from selling their rights, right? So therefore, especially where these companies have a huge amount of money, have a huge amount of have a huge amount of have a huge amount of capitals, so that they can buy these gas emissions rights from other companies. And we think, and also this emissions gas right is not too expensive, right? The other companies are selling it as affordable as possible, right? So that the other company could buy it from them, right? Therefore, we say that the cycle will continue like that, right? The bigger companies will buy from the bigger companies will buy the emissions right from other companies, and other small companies who do not produce that much gas emissions, they will sell it as affordable as possible to other companies, right? So each companies are not going to lose anything, right? So we say that because the cycle will continue like that, then there will be no tangible benefits that we will get, right, in order to reduce the gas emissions, right? So we say that it is better for government to create better regulations to regulate these companies, right? We say that instead of creating those system like trading system, we think that we have to create system where we can see the tangible impacts. For example, each companies have to invest to the development of forestry, for example, or they have to create their own forest, for example, they have to plant their own trees, for example, right? Where we can see where from those things, from those regulations, we can see the actual benefits, the tangible benefits that that is implemented by each companies, right? Because because we also think that there is an urgency for the government to create this type of regulations where we can see the tangible benefits, right? Because we think that in our current status quo, where global warming is getting increased, where a lot of people are getting this advantage, and already a lot of sectors, a lot of ocnums already see the negative impacts of this global warming. We think that it's important for government to force this company to create tangible as soon as possible. For this reason, we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. Now to respond to the case from PM, I'd like to call Leader of Opposition here.
Okay, let me set my timer first. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, the motion clearly said that emission trading is not a solution. It means it's not a solution at all. My question here is, how did the government side of the House ignore the good things about the emission trading system? Maybe there are some bad impact in the system, but we also have to admit that every system also have a pros and contra, also have a bad and good. I think you have to focus on the bad side of the emission trading, but it's okay because I, as the leader of opposition, will give you another point of view, which is the good impact of this trading system. And I assure you, if the benefit of this emission trading system outweigh its disadvantage, so that the emission trading system is really a solution. Here's the thing, this motion refers to whether the system is a solution or not. It does not refer to system giving more harm than good. So emission trading is indeed a solution. That's what I will emphasize. Although we do have to hold carbon as much as possible. That's better to hold it than to do nothing and just give up, right? I still cannot understand why the government side, the House side said that emission trading is not a solution. Yes, it might be have a bad impact, but there are a lot of good impact of this system. So my theme line, as I said before, is to give another view on the advantage of emission trading and why it has more advantage and can cover the drawbacks, especially why this system is a solution. Me as the leader of opposition will bring the prologue, why we think this system is good and the benefit of emission trading system itself. And our second speaker will present the importance about emission trading. So next, move on to my argument. Considering environmental conditions are so alarming, our world is dying and it caused by a large amount of carbon in the atmosphere so that the ozone layer cannot reflect sunlight. The effect, the earth is getting warmer every day. This causes a reduction in the amount of ice as it continues to melt, and as well as forest fires, and the temperature gets warmer. To overcome this severe environmental damage, cooperation between countries is needed, whatever has done by the state to protect their environment, even trade in a carbon. Also, there are a Paris Agreement. Under the Paris Agreement, each country must determine, plan, and regularly report on the contribution that it undertakes to mitigate global warming. There are no mechanism forces a country to set a specific emission target by specific date, but each target should go beyond the previously set targets. Now I will explain more about emission trading. An emission trading system, or ATS, is market-based instrument that can be used to reduce greenhouse gas or GHG emissions. It works on principle of cap and trade. The government imposed a limit cap on total emission in one or more sectors of the economy. Companies in these sectors need to hold one permit for every ton of emissions they release. They may either receive or buy permits and can trade them with other companies. Cap and trade is designed to deliver an environmental outcome. The cap must be met, or there are sanctions such as fines. Allowing trading within that cap is the most effective way to minimizing the cost, which is good for business and good for livelihood. Determining physical action that companies must take with no flexibility is not guaranteed to achieve the necessary reduction, nor is establishing a regulated price. Since the price required to drive reduction may take the policymaker several years to determine, cap and trade also provide a way of establishing rigor around emissions monitoring, reporting, and verification essential for any climate policy to preserve integrity. So with this emission trading system, this will certainly help the success of this Paris Agreement, because with this, the state can easily determine the amount of carbon in the country so that it does not exceed the specified limit. Next, I will bring the benefit of emission trading itself. ATS sets a clear price on carbon. By creating a market for GHG emissions, an ATS puts a clear price on carbon. It means that the costs caused by GHG emissions, such as the impact on public health, costs linked to extreme weather, or the extinction of certain animals and plants, are made visible and integrated into the price of goods and services. ATS puts a firm limit on emission. In an ATS, the government sets a clear emission target, capping the maximum amount of emissions that are allowed in selected sectors of the economy. This ensures that the desired environmental outcome will be reached with a steadily declining cap, and ATS also delivers a predictable reduction pathway, which sends a long-term signal from business and investment. Participating companies can choose how, when, and where to reduce emission. And ATS provides great flexibility for individual companies to decide how to best meet their obligation. Companies can reduce their own emission and or buy surplus permits from other companies. Government often allow companies to ban permits to be used at a later date in many systems. They may also use domestic or international offset credits for emission reduction projects in sector not covered by the ATS. These individual choices mean that the cost of staying under the ATS cap are minimized, not only for the companies, but for society as a whole. ATS fits various economics and political contexts. Emission trading can be tailored to suit a wide variety of economic and political contexts. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Systems are currently operating in a range of jurisdiction covering individual cities, states, provinces, countries, and regions, with the design of each system adapt to a unique economic and governance profile. ATS can provide an additional source of revenue for the government. Government may choose the auction their permits to companies. The resulting fiscal revenue can be reinvested in variety of ways, such as funding other climate action program or compensating low-income households. Emission trading provides a range of additional benefit. While the primary goal of emission trading is to reduce emission, a well-designed ATS can deliver substantial environmental, economic, and social benefit. This benefit can include cleaner air, improving resources efficiency, ensuring energy security, and creating jobs. Lastly, ATS can be linked to create a bigger, more efficient carbon market. The linking of two or more systems creates a larger carbon market, which open up and potentially cheaper emission reduction option. When systems are directly linked, permits can be used interchangeably in both systems. After my long explanation, that is why we as the opposition team think that this system, emission trading system, is important to us, and that is a solution. It's not fair for the system if we call them not a solution after all the benefit they give to us. And that's why we believe that emission trading is a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for that speech. Now to respond the case, I call upon Deputy Prime Minister here.
Am I audible?
Yeah, clear.
Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. If you take a look at the opposition's argument, they don't have goal at all, right? They only rely on the idea of Paris Agreement. But under government, I will prove you why then the Paris Agreement doesn't work at all. Number one, within that Paris Agreement doesn't work because it's only formalities on the eye of international adjudicators, right? But number two, considering the fact that these countries are very capitalist due to the need of the society. So they tend to avoid they tend to avoid to be obeyed by the rule of the Paris Agreement because many corporations would even pull away. They don't want to do the cooperation with the country because if this country, for example, doesn't want to lose profit, then they doesn't want to obey the rules of the Paris Agreement because in order to attract corporation as much as possible to come to their country, they need to actually abolish the rules of the Paris Agreements, right? We think under our side of the house, we will actually cope with the capitalist world, right? We will cope into that. We will take the bullets, right? We think that the needs of the society are going to be upheld under our side of the house, but also we are going to force those big companies to do another materials that we are going to provide under my arguments. But I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. Number one, I'm going to talk about why then the idea of emission trade is only evil circle that is not having there's not having a result at all. At number two, I'm going to talk about what is the major problems that is the cause of that is being caused of this climate change, right? But going to number one. We think that the evil circle on the emissions trade is very valid, right? Because let's be real, the cause of climate change, right? The cause of climate change is that greenhouse effect, right? The amount of this vehicle on the ground, the limitations of emissions that can be produced by some company is not significantly solve the problems. The idea of company. Number one, the company or factory that's being concerned by the government is that company who risingly super productive, right? Because number one, having a lot of budget, two, having a lot of branches company on the ground. Number three, being listed as a profit-oriented company. Why so? Because as much as this company produce emissions, as much that they can a lot of profit on the ground, right? When this company has already have name and profit, that is the moment when they doesn't want to give attention to to the limitations of the emissions, right? That is being given by the government. They're limited by 50%, for example, of the emissions. They would eventually buy other company emission trades so they can strongly strengthen their productions and being profitable, right? So nothing has really changed, right? The trend of selling and providing emission trade within this powerful company is very toxic because they play hide and seek adjudicators. For example, company A, for example, reduce the amount of emissions that they are producing in order they can actually sell it to another company, right? That leftover number to offer to the another company, meaning that the outcome and the damage are being transferred only into the other company. There is no effectiveness at all. This company are very evil, we see, right? Even that is not the case. We think that the productions of emissions in current year by this company by this company, they will actually postpone this kind of number into another year, meaning that the idea of damage and the idea of damage are going to be postponed only to this company. So the circle evil are going to be happen under this one company, right? Because they only postpone the damage that's being given into the environments, right? So we say that there's nothing drastically happen under opposition of the house, right? The damage sooner or sooner will be will be released. That is only the matter of time. This is we think that this is only formalities that is company that the company uphold in order to make sure that they're being seen as a little company, for example, on the eye of the government. So this company could eventually strengthen their profit and orient their productions in order to make sure that they get a lot of profit at the end of the day, right? So that is why the idea of trading emission is not going to happen under the Salah house because it's only evil circle occurs. But now let's talk about the idea of what is actually the cause of the climate change. We said that, let's be real, the cause of climate change is about the greenhouse effect, right? The amount of this vehicle on the ground also causes the climate change, right? This billion of people uses vehicle as their priority trade, for example. The amount of emission that is being produced by this billion of vehicle is inherently beyond. It caused the greenhouse effect also, right? Higher than factory adjudicators. The question to the opposition is that, knowing the fact that this vehicle situation also contribute to the cause of the climate change, why you don't do something on it? Why you close your eyes on this kind of scenario and you only projecting your punishment into the company yourself, right? We don't necessarily think that they are being fair enough adjudicators, right? Let's be real. We think that under our side of the house, the major problems of the climate change is that the explicit cause, put aside emissions for the producers, right? What also contribute to the climate change, right? The feeling of forests. The forests are being burned due to the need of human being. For example, Amazon already lost almost half of this rainforest due to the expansion, right? Kalimantan and other forests, for example, on Earth are being bought to the illegal logging and palm oil adjudicator. Even that's not the case. Let's see, or even that's not the case. We say that natural disaster also contribute into the forest losing, right? For example, fire forest. We say that, meaning that there is no O2 resources to counter these toxic emissions left. We don't have power to reject and absorb these emissions unless we have great forest adjudicators. We will great forest, right? What you need the most right now, you need the most is that we need to build forests, right? We need to rebuild the forest. These factories emissions could be absorbed naturally by the forest adjudicators. I think that the idea of forest being lost is our major problem considered by government adjudicators, right? We think that the moral burden to actually rebuild the forest only rely on this big company because they are the only one who actually create capitalist behavior adjudicators. That's why they need to actually being responsible for what they've done on the ground adjudicators, right? What will happen under our side of the house? Number one, we will actually force the company to to invest their money to fix and develop forests. Forest where it's needed, right? It doesn't matter where is it. The number of trees that should being planted by this company based on the damage that they are caused adjudicators, right? So even in case, for example, they want to actually, living or practice that capitalist behavior, we think it is going to be okay since we cannot cure under both sides of the house, right? The idea of capitalism. But at least under our side of the house, they want to be capitalist, for example, then they need to be willing to actually plant more trees on the ground adjudicators. So there will be no damage happen under outside of the house, because they want to produce as much as possible, and they need to be willing to actually plant and rebuild the forest as much as possible. What will happen under outside of the house? Knowing the fact that the losing of forest also cause the damage of local community educators, right? Or even living being that is being damaged by these productions of company on the ground. For example, Newmont and whatsoever, or even forest in Papua, for example, those Papuan people are losing their job because the main resources of them is is looking for food inside of the forest, for example, right? So the idea of local community are being damaged by this superpower company, are valid under outside the house. So we think that the idea of forcement are going to be valid because they want to actually fix the local community, money situations by doing a lot of plantations. So we're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, DPM, for that speech. Now to respond DPM case, I call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, I'm gonna set my timer first. Okay, I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We see two things in the government side of the house's case. How they would not define emission trading, and they're concerned about the emission trading would not be the best solution. Let's address them both. For them to win their homes, will have to arbitrary benefits, and their mechanism will have to be better than ours. We need to clarify when the government side of the house pointed out that we as the opposition side of the house said that this emission trading would have been justified from time to time, because what we actually believe here is that emission trading or carbon trading can be a solution to the problem of deforestation and community welfare and their livelihood to produce the economy boosting. This shows that economic and environmental benefits can be reaped simultaneously if we are committed to protecting the environment. How is this emission trading will go well? This will go well, perfectly smooth, if we anticipated the emission trade properly when with a good mechanism. Emission trading is designed to deliver an environmental outcome. Just like my first speaker has said, the trade must be met, or there are sanctions such as fines. Allowing trading within the emission is the most effective way of minimizing the cost, which is good for business and good for households and their livelihood to boost the economy. The determining physical action that companies must take with no flexibility is not guaranteed to achieve the necessary reductions, nor is establishing a regulated price. Since the price is required to drive reductions, may take policymakers several years to determine. The emission trading also provides a way of establishing rigor around emissions monitoring, reporting, and verification essential for any climate policy to preserve integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, as my first speaker has clearly explained to you, you must notice that when we as the opposition side of the house would say that we actually meant by emission trading is actually a market-based system aimed at reducing greenhouse gas that contribute to global warming, particularly carbon dioxide emitted by burning fossil. Moreover, if the emission trading is just a formality like what the government team says, then why does Indonesia, our own country, get an incentive of 56 million US dollars or the equivalent of 112 billion rupiah from Norway because it succeeded in reducing carbon emissions? There is already approved by this emission trading success example. This incentive payment is a collaborative REDD plus or reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. Resulting in two-sided benefits with our economy and environment advantages around the world. Emission trading, the buying and selling of permits amid the greenhouse gases caused by burning fossil fuels, right, is becoming a top strategy for reducing pollution that cause a global climate change. Emission trading reduce emissions such as those from power plants by setting a limit on pollution and creating a market. It's a system designed to reduce pollution in our atmosphere and giving the benefits to the economy. The emission and greenhouse gas emission that drive global warming is a firm limit on pollution. And getting to the best case scenarios, like even if you could just say that, so the government can sketch the government argument talking about the emission trading would not like it to be the best solution and would rather unjustify this emission trading. But it is actually turned out to be a good. Why do we say that? Because if we look closely and deeply into the scheme of emission trading, one of the reasons why we believe that emission trading is a solution for global warming is that the government who has the firms are free to choose the most cost-effective way of meeting permit requirement. For example, they have an incentive to develop better technology which limits carbon emissions. However, if the price of limit is low, they may decide to buy more. Gradual reduction in permits. The idea of emission trading is for government to gradually reduce the number of available permits from year to year. Therefore, firms need to increasingly find more ways to reduce carbon emission. And after all of my rebuttals in the end of the day about the arguments and proposals towards the idea of not justifying the emission trading is that they would rather choose linear economy are just some baseless arguments that don't particularly stand any point. It has to start from the ground and from the scratch. I think I'm going to move on to my argument. This is the extension case brought by my first speaker earlier, Cing. Okay, my first argument is the importance of emission trading. Why is it very important to do emission trading in this case? Emission trading is one of the ways, or maybe the only ways to help environment itself. Why so? Because we already given you the proof, like the award from Indonesia, and we are gonna give you another proof to let you believe that this emission trading is gonna be the best solution. Let's take a look at America. America has been very effective in tackling environmental problems in the past. They have trading like sulfur dioxide permits helping to limit acid rain in the world. The big attraction for governments concerned with spamming carbon dioxide is that emission trading is much easier to implement than expensive direct regulation. Just like you already giving the example, the other regulation, you said this is not a solution. How could our own country get the award from other countries? Because we are going to prove if the regional commission trading scheme can be joined up globally with a strong carbon price, it could be a relatively pain-free and speedy method to help the carbon. My second argument is the urgency of emission trading. Why we believe that emission trading should be the first prioritized thing here? Because emission trading can provide a global response to a global challenge by allowing for the use of offsets, which lower compliance costs, can help involve other jurisdictions in the fight against climate change, and may even inspire them to establish their own emission trading system as the clean development mechanism offset program inspired by other countries. This allows for countries to work together to reduce emission as well as establishing a market-based mechanism to enhance efforts. Emission trading incentivizes innovation and identifies lowest cost solutions to make businesses more sustainable by connecting emission trading system as any other country has done. Widens the pool of participants to trade with, which reduces the cost. This can allow for even greater emission reduction to be achieved at a lower cost than previously. The cooperative approaches by other worlds have set a positive point of view towards the agreement tapped into this cost effectiveness. My last argument is the benefits of the emission trading. With this emission trading justified, therefore, come a lot of benefits from emission trading. For instance, while the primary goal of emission trading is to reduce emission, a well-designed emission trading scheme can deliver substantial environmental, economic, and social benefits. This benefit can include cleaner air, improving resource efficiency, ensuring energy security, and creating jobs. There are still a lot of benefits from emission trading if this would be justified, such as reduced over-reliance on centralized bureaucratic procedures that sometimes defy common sense, reduce the cost of achieving environmental goals, cost of pollution control, or reduce in source are permitted to find the most efficient way of reducing emissions, essential in harnessing self-interest to promote this common good. This is our goals actually. You don't actually hurt our goals. To promote flexibility and freedom of choice, minimizes the need of coercion, less information about production process is needed by regulatory agencies. Efforts are aimed at achieving environmental goals, not complying with procedures. The burden is redirected toward industry agencies to devise ways to reduce emission efficiently. Ladies and gentlemen, the regulatory agency takes like estimating how much pollution exists in the air shed, auctioning right to pollute, permitting rights to be transparent, monitoring, and penalizing polluters who exceed limits are still considerable, but overall less demanding than under the command and control approach to the regulation. And last but not least, in the end of the day, our goal is to benefit the both sides, which is to benefit the environment in which we live and our livelihood of the people themselves by carrying out this emission trading to create a boosting economy for both the
Time is up.
companies in the And listening by this far, we as the opposition side of the House has already brought up the government side of the House arguments. And by this, we as the opposition side of the House probably oppose this motion. I think that's all I got, and thank you.
Thank you, DLO. Now to respond the case from DLO, I'd like to invite Government Whip.
Am I audible?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. It's very a shame for opposition side of the House neglecting our characterization related to characterization of company that they are being profit oriented anyway. No engagement at all provided by opposition side of the House into that extent anyway. We agree with the contextualization of opposition that's saying that the world that we are living currently is dying, right? But we think that by doing emission trading, we think that it is not a best solution that we have in order to reduce the damage that we have currently, right? We think that in our side of the house, very clear that we are going to reduce the damage of climate change by not doing emission trading itself, but more likely we are going to do planting the forest, educating society, and so on and so forth. Right? There are several cases that I'm going to respond towards opposition side of the house. Right? First of all, they talk about how actually they talk about the beneficial of emission trading. That in the end, the company are going to be able to reduce the emissions by doing emission trading itself, right? Look, but in the end of the day, there was no clear explanation given by opposition side of the house how then in the end of the day the company is suddenly are going to be altruistic and willing to reduce the emission itself, right? Even though at a to portray that the company or government are going to have a capacity to incentivize and develop the technology, for examples. We think that in the end of the day, the company and government will not do so. Why? Because my previous speakers already taught you that the characterization of company are profit oriented, right? Most likely they are going to take the profit and allocate it for their own selves, right? For the sake of self-interest itself, right? In the end of the day, there was no explanation given by opposition how then they can assure the company will willingly to allocate the profit significantly to develop the technology, for examples, right? Because in the end of the day, even though at a very base case cannot, because we think that in the end of the day, the company are most likely are going to be corrupted anyway, right? The case of Lumpur Lapindo, for example, even though in the end of the day, they are going to be failed on reducing the damage, they simply can still run away from their own responsibility because they have the money anyway, right? Because they have the profit anyway, right? So in the end of the day, the benefit that it's provided by opposition side of the house is unlikely to be achieved anyway, right? So so at a very base, so they are trying to say that okay, the government is going to have a capacity to develop the technology, for examples. Maybe in the end, the technology is going to be developed anyway. But in the end, there is no explanation that can guarantee us how then in the end of the day the technology is going to be manifested that well by the country, for examples, because the country also needs to consider regarding about their human resources capacity, for examples. It is very useless the moment when you want to develop the technology, for examples, but in the end of the day the capacity of your human resources are not going to be enough to to buy the technology, for examples, right? Because we need to because the grassroots problem is that the the characterization of the country and its people within, right? So what we are trying to say is that in our side of the house, we are going to solve the root problem itself, right? By by more likely to planting the forest and educate the society, for examples, right? Because the problem that we have in current status quo regarding the world is dying is because of most of the society, for examples, do not have enough mindset on how important it is to protect to protect the environment, for examples. So in our side of the house, we are not going to do we are not going to rely on emission trading, ladies and gentlemen, but most likely we are going to push to push the stakeholders involved by the government, a local community, and so on and so forth, right? We most likely to educate the society on at least do reborization, for examples, painting more forests, for examples, and stuff like that, right? Because the based on the systems that has been characterized by opposition side of the house is that we can say that emission trading more likely into the business rather than reducing the climate change itself, right? Emission trading not merely has an intention to reduce the climate change. Why that's a problem? Even at a base case scenario, the money and profit is going to be calculated well by both parties. For examples, the company is going to get the money, but in the end of the day, you cannot assure that the profit is going to be significantly allocated to reduce the climate change itself, right? Because most likely, because even at a base case scenario, that the company is going to allocate the money to reduce the damage, the damage of climate change. But the question is how significant the money will be allocated, for examples, right? Because we think that in the end of the day, in our side of the house, we think that emission trading is not going to be a best solution. So instead of we are going to do planting more forests, right? That it's way more tangible and easier to be accessed anywhere, right? Where most of the stakeholders are going to be able to contribute to reduce the climate change itself, right? So based on that argumentation, we think that emission trading is not going to be a best solution to reduce the climate change itself, because we cannot assure that those companies are going to be willing to allocate the profit to reduce the climate change, since we are living in capitalistic world, right, where most of the stakeholders are money oriented, for examples. So the best solution that we have is that by sticking in our stance anyway, by pushing individuals or and local communities to plant the forest, for examples, to taking care taking care to our environment by not throwing the garbage in random places, for examples. So we think that there is way more feasible rather than we follow the scenario of oppositions. So we're very proud to support the motion.
Thank you, Government Whip. Now to respond the case from Government Whip, I call upon Opposition Whip. And it's yours.
Am I audible?
Yeah, but it's slightly echoing, so maybe you could.
Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Government says that emission trading is inefficient. That is very untrue. Let's look at China as an example, ladies and gentlemen. China has implemented a carbon emission trading system since 2013, right? Many methods have been used to evaluate the effects and efficiency of carbon trading in reducing carbon emissions. Evaluating emission trading to determine if it has current results show that implementing emissions trading policies in China significantly reduces carbon by 24.2%, and the average efficiency of the system has increased every year. So the government's understanding that that the emissions trading system is inefficient is totally wrong. The government also says that trading in emissions will not regulate companies to be environmentally friendly. That is simply not true. This emission trading system actually directs companies to be environmentally friendly. In this system, the company will provide investment funds to developing countries with tropical forests, where these funds will later be used to, for example, increase the number of trees. And the more companies that run this system, the more trees will be planted, right? And the more emission gas absorber will also be absorbed. This is one of how companies at least pay for their sins for what they are already producing to the environment. And the system will be much better for the company than doing nothing. Continuing what was conveyed by my second speaker, proof of the success of this emissions trading, such as example, Indonesia. Indonesia has been selling carbon emissions since 25, right? Since 2005, right? One of which is through the Clean Development Mechanism project. And this project is an emission reduction project in developing countries that aims to obtain certified emissions reductions, right? By purchasing this, developed industrial countries can claim their emission reduction targets. And in fact, this project succeeded in reducing emissions by 10,000 tons of carbon. And the facts also show that each year carbon trading will contribute to non-tax state revenue by 2.5%. If it can be maximized, carbon trading will have a big role in the framework of state revenue. In addition to economic benefits, carbon trading is an opportunity for Indonesia to be able to pursue emission reduction targets. Due to the fact emission trading is a careful solution in the face of today's globalization, currently the rights to pollute the air by industries in developed countries are granted exclusively and limited, right? And the rights are then converted into security certificates, which are awarded equally to all fillings. However, this regulation does provide an opportunity for industries to discharge emissions that meet regulatory limits. It is in order to solve this problem that emissions trading is necessary. For example, a factory is experiencing an increase in production costs resulting in emissions that meet regulatory limits. And the factory can use this existing scheme in emissions trading, namely REDD+. And how do we do it? The company will invest funds used to prevent forests, like what I said before, used to prevent forest destruction in developing countries with forests that can absorb emissions. Let's take an example again from Indonesia. Indonesia is a country that has the largest forest with an area equal to twice the size of Singapore. It is really big, ladies and gentlemen. Indonesia is also a country that is in demand by the world's bona fide companies who want to wash their sins away. And Shell, for example, is a Dutch oil and gas company that invests every 1 cent of the price of gasoline it sells to Indonesian forests. This is the real form of emission trading, ladies and gentlemen. Industrial companies that produce emissions that exceed the limit will invest funds in forests in developing countries. And developing countries can use the funds to protect the forests they own as a sink for the emissions of these companies. So where did it go wrong? So developing countries have no more reason to say that they don't have funds to protect forests because industrial companies have invested in them, right? From this trade, developing countries can help reduce the amount of emissions produced by industrial companies and also get investment funds. Emissions trading put the right price on carbon. By creating a market of greenhouse gas emissions, emissions trading provide a clear and tangible price of carbon, which means costs arising from greenhouse gas emissions such as impacts on public health, costs related to extreme weather or extinction of flora and fauna can be seen and implemented into the price of goods and services. We believe that the most appropriate way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is in this carbon pricing policy. The price of carbon has the benefit of being able to encourage or make people reduce activities that can produce carbon. For example, the use of bicycles as a substitute for private motorbikes or the use of public transportation rather than private cars. And in addition, the price of carbon can generate money that can be used in part to finance and clean up of dirty activities, such as investing in research pools to help reduce the pollution generated by cars. With the carbon price in place, the cost of stopping climate change can be distributed across generations rather than being borne by future generations. The next is emission trading is limited to emissions. In emissions trading, the government sets clear emission targets by limiting the maximum amount of emissions allowed in a particular economic sector, right? This can ensure that goal of that the goal of a healthy environment is achieved with limits steadily decreasing. Emissions trading can also provide significant predictable abatement pathways. Participating companies or countries are free to choose how, when, and where they want to reduce emissions, like what my first speaker said. Why? Because emissions trading provides a high degree of flexibility for each company to decide how best to fulfill their obligations by not forgetting the rules that have been made. As my first speaker explained earlier, companies can reduce their own emissions and buy surplus permits from other companies, right? And emission trading is very suitable to be implemented in various contexts of life, both economically and politically. Even if we could just say that the government that the government team's case talking about the emissions trading would not likely to be the best solution and would rather unjustify this emissions trading, it's actually turned out to be good. Why do we say that? Because if we look closely and deeply into the scam of emissions trading, one of the reasons why we believe the emission trading is a solution for global warming is that the government who has the firms are free to choose the most uh, I'm sorry. Why do we say, I'm sorry, one of the reasons why we believe that emissions trading is the solution for global warming is that the government who has the firms are free to choose the most cost-effective way of meeting permit requirements. For example,
Time's up.
they have the incentive to develop better technology which limits carbon emissions. However, if the price of permits is low, they may decide to buy more. So the idea of emission trading is for governments to gradually reduce the number of available permits from year to year. Therefore, firms need to increasingly find more ways to reduce carbon emissions, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, we once again state that we as the opposition strongly oppose today's motion because based on arguments we have brought, we believe that we deserve better to win than the government side of the house. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Opposition Whip. Now we proceed to the reply speech. I'd like to invite the opposition reply first. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, our entire team has been very clear in explaining our arguments to you. Okay, I'm gonna Ladies and gentlemen, our entire team has been very clear in explaining our arguments to you and to the panel. Our first speaker already explained how emission trading will be implemented well, if initially justifying this kind of action. Our first speaker has succeeded in explaining what the impact will be if this is confirmed, justified. The impact we mean is positive impact, including justifying emission trading mentioned above. And also our first speaker has explained very clearly about the impact comparison that will be implemented to the stakeholders, while the government team did not explain the importance of the impact comparison that will be implemented. After my first speaker continued to my second speaker, myself. Myself explained the importance of doing emission trading and prioritizing this, and I have also presented examples of reason why emission trading is very important to do. Namely, for instance, Emission trading schemes have been very effective in tackling any environmental problems in the past, such as, for instance, just like I said before, in any environment, it could trade any sulfur dioxide permits to the goal to limit active rain in the world. I also explained to you the worst case scenarios if their team will not justify emission trading. I have explained to them, namely emission trading is actually a market-based system aimed at reducing greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming. Without this, how the world will survive. Meanwhile, their team keeps hitting our arguments for a reason that is not so clear enough, just because they think this will not guarantee the livelihood of the environment. But we have seized the arguments by saying that emissions trading has the firms are free to choose the most cost-effective way of meeting permit requirement, and also provide examples that are appropriate to the context, such as if emission trading has an incentive to develop better technology, which limits the carbon emission. Just like my third speaker has already explained to you, the technology will be made by this money of emission trading. Last but not least, my third speaker has given the conclusion about the overall debate, making rebuttal to the government team, such as saying that emission trading has always been successful in protecting our environment. And my third speaker has successfully explained the mechanism for how emission trading will work. So my third speaker has explained to you, two parties will trade in this emission gas, will get the money, and the money they have earned will increase the company's economy and can eventually come up with a new idea or mechanism. For example, my third speaker has explained making sophisticated technology to help maintain environmental balance. And because of our argument that have repeated all of the arguments which were initially irrelevant in the context of emission trading, which was made a solution or not, the panel should be driven to win over our side. The government team failed to provide an explanation about if they wanted to not justify emission trading and they had an idea to come up with an alternative they could work. But the government team never touched on an explanation of these examples of alternatives. And also the government team could not guarantee this alternative this alternatives they suggest it will work well, even if their alternative can work, which they have said earlier. They have failed in explaining if is this emission trading is not going to be the best solution for the environment and the company. My third speaker has explained to you, actually, if doing this emission will earn money, and in the end of the day, the money will be used to create a patent technology to help the environment stay safe, and that argument is still not good for the environment with the alternative they suggest. They suggest give an example of planting trees, they said, throughout the forest. But as we all know, all trees will grow for a long time. Just like my third speaker has clearly explained to you, they will not absorb the maximum excess carbon emission. Even if these trees can absorb, it will take a very, very long time to absorbing emission gases in the air. And what about the faster and more effective solution? Just like all of our speaker has explained, the more effective and efficient way to do so is to selling the gas emission. And in the end of the day, our team deserves and win. Thank you.
Thank you, opposition reply. Now to close the debate, I'd like to invite the government reply. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, I'm going to talk about 3 things in my speech. Number 1, I'm going to talk about capitalist behavior. Number 2, emissions solving. And number 3, the benefit of the motions. Going to number 1, capitalist behavior. Under oppositions, they want to their goal is to limit the emissions, meaning that they want to submit proposal to actually softly abolish the idea of capitalist behavior, right? Their proposal is going to be good if they can provide. Why then, even if capitalist world right now are very massive, exist, why then they will be success? Under side of the house, we cope with the current world educators because knowing the fact that abolishing capitalists is something that is inherently impossible to do educators, right? Because we consider that the consuming world right now cannot be changed due to the need of the society, right? We say emission trade is not the solution because as long as this company has money to has money, they don't have problem at all to easily bribe their emission productions, right? Simply because they have money and power. Because the damage right now are going to be postponed into the next year, or even being transferred into another company, meaning that the damage is already there, right? But it is the matter of the time. But going to the second issue, emission solving. Under the side of the house, they constantly demonizing that the company, but still don't do anything to the fact that this vehicle use is also major cause to that opposition problems, right? If they want to apply the emissions trade on the idea of company, then they need to actually willing to do something to the idea of vehicles use educators, right? They cannot rely only on applying this proposal only one-handed educators, right? They can close their eyes on the vehicle emission situation, right? We think that underside of the house, they are very picky. They only rely on the idea of Paris Agreement, but under outside of the house, we strongly believe that the idea of Paris Agreement is very for only formality, and that's not going to happen. We tackle that case educators. But what happened under outside of the house on the idea of emission solving? We say that emissions are being produced. There is the emissions are being produced, meaning the emission should be absolute, right? How do you do so? By fixing the damaged forests, right? Or even developing great tree planting as much as possible. So the idea of giving damage should be applied to the idea of taking damage back adjudicators. How you do so? First, forcing the massive company to actually plant trees based on how many emissions that they produce a year adjudicates. We think that this is very logic, right? Because we consider that the capitalist behavior is not it cannot be fixed, we say that we are going to cope to the problems. You want to actually produce as much as possible to get profit, and you need to be willing to actually plant trees as much as possible. We think there is more logic under our side of the house, right? But on the idea of benefits of the motions, we consider that under our side of the house, what would happen? Number one, we would eventually be able to reduce the emissions naturally by planting a lot of trees as much as possible on the ground adjudicators, right? But furthermore, we think that fixing forests are going to be applied to actually fixing the problems of the local company, right? Local community, right? We say that we consider that local community also are being damaged due to the exploitations that is done by this company, right? We say that local have power. We say that the local in current status quo have no power to actually say no to the company or even to governments, right? When their forests are being exploited, for example, simply because they don't have veto right to begin with, right? So under absolute hash, we are going to actually strengthen a channel to actually for this local company, local community to say no to this big company, right? But even further, right? We see that our under outside of the house, we are going to actually fixing the living being that is happen in the inside of the forest, right? Because we cannot close our eyes. That's saying that these animals also are being damaged by the behavior of the company exploitation, those exploiting those forest adjudicators. We say that under outside the house, by fixing this kind of forest, we are also encouraging more living being are being cured under outside of the house, right? But even further, right? We think that the idea of image of the company under outside of the house will be seen as a good company by the society and the government. So the goal of these benches to actually promoting their productions, for example, are going to be strengthened under outside the house, because right now there will be more people demanding to actually buy this product, because this company are being seen as hero, for example, to this local company to do to the good image that this kind company are trying to fix it. Right. So by this reason, we believe that our team deserves to win the debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, opposition reply. Sorry, government reply. Now that's the end of our debate. Thank you, guys. So please give the adjudicator time to decide the winner and also to fill the ballots. You may stay here for a while, so wait for a moment. Thank you. Hi everyone. Is everyone complete? Government, are you here?
Complete.
Opposition?
Yes, complete.
Okay. I'm gonna start my verbal education. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the debate. As judges, as usual, I'd like to give my verbal education. First of all, maybe I would like to give like the general comment, and also I'd like to address what actually needs to be improved and in this debate. Second of all, I would jump to announce the winning team and also the reason why I give uh, the credit to the winning team. Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that this debate is not really have a clash point because both of the team is focused on their own cases, how they, for example, they're trying to prove this emission trading is not a solution. And speaking of solution, I think that the lack of this debate is also the analysis on what kind of problem that need to be addressed in status quo. I mean the characterization that brought by government and also opposition still lack on analysis on how that actually what the world is faced currently in status quo in regards to carbon emission, for example. Like I know you already mentioned about climate change and etc., but I don't really see the portrayal or the tangible portrayal that coming from both of the team to see that what is actually the condition of the world today in regards to the carbon emission trading. And second of all, I think that I don't know, but it is prepare motion. So I assume and also I have expectation that you guys already read a lot about emission trading. But I see that in the debate there was no one like mention to me why the system or the process of why, or at least the factor that caused this emission trading. For example, you could mention like actually this emission trading is already set in the Kyoto Protocol, right? Like it is when certain countries like countries of Annex 1 with countries of non-Annex 1 to have agreement that countries with the forests that already preserved, like in developing countries like in Indonesia have obligation, for example, to preserve their forest to save the planet, and also countries who has good in industry, for example, in developed countries or emitter itself also have right to like buy emission. I mean that you could have like explain to me the process of this emission trading at the end of the day. I mean, it's not about limited only on companies to companies, but also this agreement between countries and to another countries. For example, like carbon sink countries to the emitter one. How, for example, the buyer will afford credit certified emission reduction when they buy this emission trading from developing countries, for example. That's the lack of analysis. Second of all, I also expect that you guys also could analyze on the idea of interest of the countries itself in fighting climate change. I mean, both developed and developing countries. What is actually their interest and why they come up with this emission trading? While we have know that you both agree that the problem is on the idea of climate change, but now you're going to prove me why this emission trading is not really a solution. And you don't need to come up with the idea, for example, in the background, like showing uh, how company works, but maybe rather showing uh, the problem in status quo in regards to emission, and also how countries deal with that, whether in the Kyoto Protocol or even in Paris Agreement have effective measure to tackle that. Okay, so yeah, I think you need to be more specific on the characterization of the actor that involved. However, I tried to analyze this debate as what it is. So because of I cannot find the class point, so I just want to give credit to team that can show me, that can identify the problem that brought in each team, and also how the at the end of the day their proposal can deal with that. Okay, I think I'm gonna directly announce the winner first. So the winner goes to government side of the house with one main point, one big main point reason that actually is so obvious that on the idea of characterization, I think government side of the house is slightly upper hand rather than opposition on opposite side of the house in addressing the idea of, for example, how now come this emission trading is only profit to certain companies, because the companies will always, utilize this kind of opportunity to produce as much as emission, so that their industry or even their business will still sustain at the end of the day. And they also mentioned about how this company will always think about profit that they get instead of environment, think about the addressing about the environment issue itself. While they believe also, while the company have actually capacity to, invest on the technology to be able to produce with eco-friendly technology, however, they ignore that by keeping on using keeping on producing this emission in order they get profit. And this kind of characterization is neglected, I think, neglected by opposition side of the house, because opposition side of the house, I see that your analysis is only focused on the idea, you want to prove me that this is a solution, that this emission trading will be beneficial for certain countries, but without necessarily first engaging to the idea of the company itself, how they, for example, they are profit oriented, how they, for example, try to abuse this opportunity and etc. I think before you jump into your benefit, you should have engaged to the government side of the house scenario at very first place, right? Second of all, the lack of characterization that come from opposite side of the house. I mean, when you want to talk about the benefit of this thing, you need to analyze first what is involved. For example, if I were opposition, I would say that most of developing countries like Indonesia, for example, have already have opportunity to sell their emission to the developed countries, and how does it impact toward the economy? Because basically this type of motion is mostly only talk in around the issue of environment versus economy, because which one that we will prioritize at the end of the day, or maybe we could go hand in hand, while, for example, we can save the environment, but at the same time we can also still keep or maintain our economic growth. And I think the opposition side of the house could have brought that idea at very first place. For example, you could have said like, okay, at least that this emission trading will decelerate the climate change in status quo, or the global warming itself, because at least that developing countries have obligation to preserve their forests, for example, and with that kind of preservation, they will also get money. And at the end of the day, both of them will get mutual benefit. One is that they can preserve their forest, and another, they can still running their industry itself. While second of all, you could have say like how this actually long last investment, because at least when we if we don't do this, like I mean, the reason why actually this kind of emission trading exists is because before, when in the Paris Agreement, when the developing countries are obliged to preserve their forests, but they don't have any feedback or benefit from that, because they don't have any like compensation. And that's why the agreement coming in Kyoto Protocol that agree that, okay, in order for you to have feedback and also profit as well, you have a right to sell your emission. And you know that the benefit of this selling of emission trading is huge, because most of tax, also carbon tax, and also have been implemented with a huge amount of money and etc. And this could also boost the economy of developing countries itself, but at the same time also preserve the environment of the developing countries and also developed countries. I think you could have you should have more analyzed into that as well. Yeah, I think there in some point you are going to go there, but unfortunately I didn't get like more explanation on the broader scope. Like you only jump into the practical benefit that, oh, this will good for business, for example, or good for livelihood and etc. Because they have set clear price, the cost is beneficial for sustainability, and also is more efficient to carbon market and etc. etc. But I think those kind of practical benefit also should be followed by the analysis on why this is important for developing countries, for example, or why this is also important for developed countries. And that's why I give the winning to the government team. And my suggestion is that in the next debate, you should engage as opposition. For example, you should engage toward your opponent cases for the government. Also, you should, I think, at very first place, should give a clear explanation what is actually happen happen in status quo in regards to the problem, because we talk about solution, right? So when you talk about solution, the adjudicator needs to see what is actually the problem and why this kind of solution is the right solution or mismatched solution instead. And I think that's the lack of the lackness of this debate. Hopefully in the future you can be improved. And if you, I don't want to talk longer, you can approach me if you need more feedback after this. So thank you very much for the debate and good luck for the next round. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You can approach me. You can chat me via WhatsApp if you want.